So this is bylaws, motions, and procedures, or my favorite is, who is Bob and why is he telling us what to do? Because people will refer to Bob's Rules of Orders or Robert's Rules of Orders. So just because I love details, Henry Martin Robert was a brigadier general in the U.S. Army, and so it is named after him. He was asked to preside over a church meeting in San Francisco, and when he left it, he said, when there is no law, but every man does what is right in his own eyes, there's the least of real liberty. And so he decided there needed to be rules on how meetings were organized, how meetings went, and he came up with Robert's Rules of Orders. So that's why Bob gets a say in how we run our PTA meetings. Robert's Rules of Orders will be followed at the national meetings, at the state meetings, and as close as you can follow them at the local meetings. It really does make it run well. It teaches kids how to use it. I grew up in Iowa in 4-H, and we ran everything by Robert's Rules of Order. So I've been using it since I was 10 years old. And I love it. If I had a chance to go back again, I think I would train as a parliamentarian. And I think it's awesome the way that it makes things work and it runs so well. But you don't have to, in small meetings, run things by Robert's Rules of Order. But if you run them by Bob's rules and just kind of use that small version of what works, it should make a difference in making things work well for you. So the rules contained in the current edition it says right there in our bylaws for the state, shall govern the association in all cases where they are applicable and in which they are not in conflict with the bylaws of those of the state, national, articles of incorporation, or nonprofit act under which we're incorporated. So whenever it doesn't conflict with anything, it is what we run. And this is the latest edition. It came out in September last year of Robert's Rules of Order. It's definitely a thick book and it's very small print, but it does in the back have some charts that spell it out a little bit easier. It's got an awesome index in the back. The other thing that comes in handy is this little one that's called the Newly Revised in Brief, and it is much smaller book, still the same small print, but it it does have things spelled out in charts. Let me get it real quickly, in charts where you can see, and it makes it real clear. And again, it's well organized. So I would recommend that is an expense that your PTA should pick up, and it should follow with whoever's in charge. So get a copy. It is in our, a mini version of it is in our kit of materials, and there are lots of resources online. There are lots of study sheets. So if you want to pull something up for somebody else, there are lots of different ways that you can do that. So in our kit of materials, which will come out, and some of this, for those of you who were with me this morning, you've seen it once before. In your kit of materials, which will come from the state as soon as they've got it revised and ready to go, which will be after the convention. In the kit of materials, this is what's in there on the table of contents. And if you look, there's a section 4, which is on bylaw instructions and bylaw forms. And then if you go on down and look, look above, section 2 is officers, and it spells out specifically what each officer does and how. So a lot of what I've presented, I did pull straight from the state forms so that there wasn't any conflict. You were hearing the same language, and we all learn in different ways. Some of us love to read it, some love to read it on paper, online, and some people have to hear it, and some people have to touch it and experience it. So whatever works, hopefully we're going to hit it. The basic principles of parliamentary procedures are that all members have equal rights, privileges, and obligations. No one can speak until recognized by the chair, which eliminates the chaos in the room sometimes. And personal remarks during debate are out of order. So you can speak to the item that's on the floor, but not personal remarks. Only one question at a time can be considered. So when we're talking about one thing, we don't go off and talk about something else. We talk about what's on the floor at the time, and only one person has the floor at any given time. Any of you who've watched school board meetings, they do not have a parliamentarian at the school board meetings. Just saying. Members have the right to know what is the immediately impending question and to have it restated before a vote is taken. So sometimes a conversation will go on and people will lose, where was it we started? And you know, when they say, okay, now we're going to vote. Well, we just talked about a whole bunch of things concerning it. I don't remember what was originally said because so many people have added to it. So before a vote is taken, the motion should be restated. And a free and full discussion of every main motion is a basic right. Again, think about your school board meetings. A quorum must be present for business to be conducted. If you do not have a quorum there, you do not have an official meeting and business cannot happen. You can still sit and talk, you can discuss what's going on, but you can't take any action if there's not a quorum. A majority decides the question except when basic rights of members are involved or a rule provides otherwise. So anything that would deprive a member of any right takes a 2/3 vote instead of a majority. So cutting off debate deprives you of the right to further discussion. So that's a 2/3 vote. As a kind of a simple way to remember it. When voting happens, silence is consent. So we don't have to say, because we always used to say anybody, I just lost the word, anybody choosing not to vote at the end, but silence gives consent. So if you don't vote, then you're allowing the decision to be made by the people who vote. That, yeah, makes common sense to me. And by not vote, you know, if a lot of people don't vote and say you've got 10 people there and 3 people vote for it and 2 people vote against it and the rest don't vote at all, the decision was still made by those who were there. The chair should always remain impartial. So the chair runs the meeting, but they don't comment on it. And if you've watched anything mouth going over time. If you've watched anything in the last year on the national legislature, you may have seen Nancy Pelosi step down from the chair and speak from the board, and somebody else ran the meeting during the rest of whatever that particular item was. That can be done at a PTA meeting. If the chair feels strongly enough that what they have to say needs to be said at that point, then they turn the meeting over to another person. They can come step down, even though it's not necessarily stepping down at our tables, and they speak to what the issue is. But then until that issue is closed by a vote or by tabling it, they are not the chair anymore. Then when that issue is done, then they can step back up to be the chair. Okay, so a quorum is the minimum number of members who must be present in order to conduct business. The quorum is found in your bylaws. So for board meetings and committees, the quorum is majority unless you've written it differently, which is more than half. And again, you can't take a vote unless quorum is present. A lot of us have in our local unit bylaws that 10 people make a quorum. And so check your bylaws. That's why it's important, those of you who are at secretary training, that's why it's important to have the bylaws right there in your notebook so you can refer to that. So the presiding officer at a meeting is the individual who runs the meeting. It's usually the president. But if the president's not there and none of the vice presidents are there, then the secretary calls the meeting to order and conducts an election for the chairman pro tem, who is the presiding officer for that meeting only. So if for some reason they all weren't, you know, all the top people weren't there, then you can elect somebody else and go on as long as you have a quorum. So the presiding officer facilitates the meeting, and we just did that one, and has to remain impartial during the debates. They can relinquish the chair in order to debate something, and that's what I talked about before. They can vote only to create or break a tie for a 2/3 or a 2/3, a tie or a 2/3. The exception is they may vote on anything that's a ballot vote, which was something I was not totally aware of until I read more in depth. So if it's a ballot vote, the president gets to vote because they're not letting their vote be present on the floor. Nobody's being influenced by what that person says. The presiding officer again introduces business in the proper order according to the agenda. They recognize the speakers. So they say, you know, Chris, would you like to talk? I'm not going to pronounce it right. Tricia? Did I come close on that? Tricia?
Yes.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. I didn't want to have it in my brain wrong. So yeah, they could say, Chris, you're called to the floor. Tricia, you're called to the floor. So they recognize who's going to talk. And then they determine if a motion is in order. There are times that a motion is not in order, or we've already got something on the floor. We don't want to introduce something else. They keep the discussion on the pending motion. We want it to be germane to what we're talking about. If we're talking about the budget for the year, we're not going to talk about, you know, well, at the Christmas store, are we going to have such and such going on? No. We talk about what's happening. They maintain order. They make sure things do not get out of control, that people aren't having sidebar conversations. And then they put the motions to a vote and announce the results when the vote is done. Motions are how we make official decisions. We don't just say, gee, I think we ought to do this. Everybody okay with that? All right. Let's go move on. You actually, in PTA, because we do keep records, we're a 501(c)(3), we have to have a motion on official decisions to act. And official decisions are not every little thing like, are we having pink or blue or red bows on the table? That's not an official decision. For a main motion, a formal proposal is brings it before the assembly, and it begins with, I move that. And then you tell exactly what you want. You don't tell why you want it. You don't tell the history behind it. You simply say what the action is you want to have. So for instance, today we did, I moved to move $500 from this account to that account, period. Not why we're doing it, just the fact that we're doing it. So it's the action that's going to be taken. A second is a statement by any member who agrees, and they just say second. If we were in an official situation, they don't have to stand up or anything. They don't have to be recognized, and it does not go into the minutes. It used to put in the minutes who seconded it. It's not in the minutes anymore. It's simply, it was moved by Mary Barker that I move that we move $500 from this account to that account, period, seconded. That's what goes in the minutes. And the main motion is debated. And a second, okay. The main motion is debated. And then if somebody has an amendment, if they say, well, I like that motion, but they could say they wanted to strike out some words. They wanted to insert or add some words. They wanted to strike out some words and put some others in place of them, or they wanted to substitute a paragraph or a resolution for another one. That's how we amend something. We take something out, we put something in, we take something out and put something else in, or we just take a whole thing out and put a whole nother thing in instead. Okay, that's what the amending is. For a main motion, you obtain the floor. If we're running absolutely by Robert, it would be Madam or Mr. President. When they're recognized by the chair, or they would say that, and then they'd say the chair recognizes member Tercia. The member then makes that motion. I move that. The motion is seconded before it can be considered. If nobody seconds it, then we move on to something else. It dies for a lack of a second. It doesn't go in the minutes. It simply disappears. If Chris is the only one who wants to do it and nobody else wants to second it, brush it out the door. It's done. If the motion is in order, then the chair restates the motion and opens the debate. It is moved and seconded that. And they open the debate. They can ask, are you ready for the question comes later? I don't know why that's in there. I will change that later. The maker of the motion has the right to speak first in the debate. So It has been moved and seconded that da 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 da. Would you like to speak to your motion? Then the person who's made the motion talks about why it is. That's where the why comes in. Why it is that they want to speak to it. It can be debated along with any secondary motions that are debatable, which would be the amendments. And a privileged motion takes precedent over debate on the main motion, and it must be decided before that main motion can move on. That's probably something you won't get into at your local meetings. You will see it occasionally at the state meeting or at the national meetings, where somebody comes up with a question of, this is a fiduciary item. Are our student members allowed to vote on it? Because there's some things that student members can't do because of the age that they're not allowed to make some fiduciary decisions. So that would be a debate on an incidental, to come back and find out what's going on with that. Debate is closed when discussion is ended, nobody else has anything to say, or someone says, I call for the previous question. Then a 2/3 vote has to be taken to close debate. Because remember, anything that limits your rights takes a 2/3 votes. So by closing debate, we're limiting your right to continue to speak about it. So that would be a 2/3 vote. So I call for discussion is ended, then the president or the chair would call for a vote, or a 2/3 vote to close debate. Okay, we're going to vote on closing debate. 2/3 of people pass it. Debate is closed, and then we restate the motion and call for the vote on it. But if 2/3 people did not close debate, you continue debate until again discussion ends or there's another vote to end it. You can also set time limits, and okay, you can also set time limits, and they do that sometimes at the state convention. I've heard that where they'll say, we're going to have a 10-minute debate on any item, and that can be extended. So someone can stand up and say, I vote to extend this by 10 minutes. And you would then take a vote on that and either extend it or not extend it by the 10 minutes. Okay, we've done that one. There we go. So when we're taking a vote, it's all in favor, say aye. All opposed, say no. And then the chair will say the ayes have it, it's adopted, or the noes have it, next item of business, and you move on. For debate, again, nobody speaks until they're recognized by the chair. It's not who shouts the loudest, which is why Robert got involved in this in the first place. All discussions must be relevant to the immediate question. Nobody can speak more than twice to each motion. So the second time takes place after everybody else who wanted to talk has had a chance to speak, and then they could come on a second time and speak. But one person can't talk 30 times on the item. That's no longer a valid debate for the situation. Okay, you can limit. No member can speak more than 10 minutes or is decided by members, and many limit it to 3 minutes per speaker. Again, a 2/3 vote if you want to change that. And all remarks are addressed to the chair. No cross debate is permitted. Again, if you've been to a school board member, they will say, you're not talking to the people sitting here, you're talking to the board. And so there's no cross debate. They can't go back and forth on it. You say what you have to say. The next person says what they have to say. There's no responding to what's being said unless the next person addresses to the chair. You can't speak against your motion. So if you stood up and said, I make a motion that we have a Halloween event, and then it's time to talk about it, you can't stand up and say, well, I don't know why we're celebrating Halloween, or I don't know why we're having a Halloween event. You shouldn't have made that motion to start with. So, but you can vote against it. If you listen to the discussion, and I've had this happen at a meeting once with the National Education Association, where I stood up, made a motion as a member of a committee, I made a motion, and then as I listened to the debate, I realized our little group that met at 5 o'clock in the morning to decide on things didn't have all the information we needed. Somebody else at the meeting brought in really good information. And so when it came time, I voted against that motion. And somebody looked at me and said, wait a minute, you brought it forward. And I said, yes, but they brought forward something I didn't know. And it changed my mind. I couldn't go back and talk to it, but I could vote that way. And your debates got to be issues, not personalities. No personal attacks, no questioning the motives. Talk about specifically what the motion is and where it's going. Again, if the presiding officer wants to debate, they have to turn the chair over until that motion is taken care of. And when possible, and you will see this at the state PTA meeting, when possible, you alternate between people in support and people in opposition. And at the state meetings, they actually have 2 different microphones on different sides of the room. And one is speaking for, one is speaking against, and then the one in the middle is if they're questions on procedures of what's going on. So if possible, it should be a back and forth, not just one side ranting and raving until they're done. The members may not disrupt the assembly. The rules of debate can be changed by 2/3 vote or general consent without objection. And I've heard them say, I see a lot of people online to talk without, if there's not objection, we will extend this debate for 10 more minutes. And unless somebody yells out objection, they extend it for 10 minutes. If somebody yells out, then you go back and have the 2/3 vote to see whether or not you extend that time. So running by Robert's rules, things are going to be orderly, they're going to be focused, and they're going to be polite. So I went through all the stuff. Here's what it sounds like. A member rises or raises her hand or clicks on, however you get attention at those particular meetings, rises and says, Madam or Mr. President. Then the chair says, the chair recognizes whoever it is. That member says, I move that, and states their motion. Somebody else says second, and the chair says, it's moved and seconded that, and they restate the motion. Are you ready for the question, or is there any debate? Real civil, real simple. Then the chair recognizes members wishing to speak. After that, after the debate concludes, the chair restates the motion. The question is on the motion to move the funds from here to here. Those in favor of the motion say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. We will move the funds from here to here. Or the noes have it. The motion is failed. Next item. Okay, again, moving a motion, they can stand up and say, I move to strike the amendment by striking out, or to amend the move. I move to amend by striking out the word Denver. Or, putting something, striking out something before or after. By inserting, I move to amend a motion by striking out the word, by inserting the word Las Vegas after the word Portland and before the period. So it tells exactly what's going in and where it's going in. Obviously, this is talking about where the next conventions were going to be. By striking out and inserting, I move to amend it by striking out the word $35 and inserting the word $50. So you're told very specifically and concisely what it is that you think we need to do. And then in discussion is when the why happens. So recommendations, bylaws, rules, resolutions, budgets, and audits are all adopted. When you're writing your minutes, if you're a secretary, those are all adopted. Recommendations, bylaws, rules, resolutions, budgets, and audits. Reports are filed. When somebody turns in a report, they're just turning in a report. We don't have to adopt it or not, it's simply filed. Resignations are accepted. If you do notice in PTA, it says that you hold the position until it's been refilled by someone else. And minutes and bills are approved are approved. The minutes are approved as written or as presented or as corrected. If corrections are, here we go. If corrections are made to the minutes are then approved as corrected. The treasurer's statement is neither approved or adopted, but after questions are answered regarding any item reported, it's placed in the file for audit as stipulated in the bylaws. Yeah, you ask questions. If you're unsure about something, ask about it, but the report is the report. Again, motions are adopted or lost, and I will say I have done that wrong for the last year. I will change it. It is highly recommended that main motions be put in writing, dated and signed. That way it's very clear of what happened. If so, number those slips and then write on them whether or not it's adopted or not, and those would go into the secretary's procedural manual. Bob gets things done. That's why we keep him around. You make motions that are in order, you obtain the floor properly, you speak clearly and concisely to what's going on, you obey and follow the rules of debate, and above all else, being courteous, because that's what's always in order, is being courteous to each other. And we heard from our new incoming superintendent, listening to people, listening, understanding, being courteous. So the key principles with Robert's Rules of Order are the interest of the organization comes before the individual interest. In PTA, we have lots of resolutions that have been passed they can be at the county level, but definitely at the state and national level. Once PTA has passed a resolution on something, you speak to that because that's the interest of the organization. The organization as a whole has said, this is what PTA stands for. If you don't happen to believe in that one, you don't talk against it as long as you're representing PTA. You definitely are not wearing your PTA shirt and your PTA tag and speaking against something that PTA has taken a stand on. You remain quiet on it, or you speak to it from a totally different platform. All members are equal. A quorum must be present. So all members are equal, and we've got to have enough of you here that not just 2 or 3 are making decisions, sorry. We talk about one thing at a time. A full debate is allowed. We focus on the issue, not the person, and the majority rules. In kindergarten, we used to tell the kids, you all get your say, but not everyone gets their way. So, quick, fast. This is available. A lot of it will be in your procedural manual. A lot of it is in other places. But are there any questions, concerns? At this point, unmute yourself if there's anything you have questions or concerns with.
Katie, there's one question for you that says, can a minor, from Lori, can a minor under 18 vote in a board election meeting?
If they're a member of the PTA, which goes for anybody of any age, they're allowed to vote. There is something, and I have to say I don't have it exact, but I do remember 2 years ago sitting at a state meeting where they discussed something about fiduciary decisions or contract decisions that could not be made by a person under 18. And that's as specific as I can tell you on that. But as far as board elections and motions, absolutely, they can vote on those, as long as they're a member of that body.
Katie,
Yes,
it's Karen.
thank you.
There is a special Florida statute about minors. And here's the only thing I remember about it. I could probably find it for you. But a minor cannot be used to make up your quorum. So if you need 11 and your 11th person is a student under the age of 18, they cannot be used to make up your quorum.
Thank you. I have not seen that.
But
Okay.
I do remember that.
Okay.
training.
Thank you. I had not remembered that. Thank you for being here, Karen.
Even question.
Yes.
Even if it's a PTSA?
Yes, a minor cannot be used to make up a quorum.
Really? Okay.
Interesting. Thank you.
But they can vote.